In this video, I'm gonna give you my few tips for baking from scratch. So stay tuned and keep watching. Welcome to Sweet Talk. This is Cassie here with Sweet Talk. Sweet Talk is a platform that allows me to talk everything about sweet, its tips and tricks, its business aspect, and how to successfully achieve results in all that I share on this platform. As you all know, baking is a science, and for you to be able to come out with a good result at every point in time that you bake, you want to do certain things, right? And those things are what I'm about to share with you right here and now. So let's get started. Now I have 6 tips to share with you today for baking from scratch. Number 1, make sure to stick to your recipe. Even if it's someone else's recipe, you gotta stick to it. What do I mean by that? What the recipe calls for, it's what you should do. You should not by any means try changing anything. That would ruin you whatever you are baking. So you gotta stick to whatever that recipe calls for. That's what I mean by sticking to it. Like if your recipe calls for all-purpose flour, you don't want to use cake flour. And if it calls for cake flour, you don't want to use all-purpose flour, right? Just make sure to stick to your recipe. The reason I'm saying this is you want to make sure at every point in time when someone eats your baked goods, they get the same taste all the time. It brings your baked goods gets the same results all the time. But when you don't stick to your recipe, or you don't stick to whatever recipe that you're using, you will end up not having the same results all the time. Number 2, you gotta master your ingredients. If one of the ingredients is supposed to be butter, you don't want to substitute it for oil. Butter gives a different taste from oil. So if the recipe calls for butter as one of the ingredients, you cannot go with, okay, because I do not have butter at home, I want to do oil. Remember, whenever you substitute anything, just bear in mind that you're not gonna get the same result the recipe is supposed to give. So, and if it's calling for cold butter, you want to use cold butter. If it's calling for room temperature butter, you want to use room temperature butter. You don't want to go for cold butter. There are reasons for all this. This is why you must always do your research to know why I should use these ingredients and not substitute it. You must do your research, and that will make you get used to those ingredients and master them. When you master those ingredients, it will help you stick to it. It will help you stay by it. It will help you stand by it, and it will help you use it as it was called for all the time. Number 3, you want to make sure to gather all of your ingredients before baking. Why am I saying this? Now, if you don't get all of the ingredients you'll be using for that particular thing that you want to bake ready and set them out so that you can see them all, if you don't do that, you will end up omitting something. For instance, if you are trying to bake a cake and maybe you laid out your flour on the table, you laid out your baking powder on the table, and you laid out every other thing, your butter, your milk, you laid them all out on the table, but you didn't put out your salt on the table, you might end up messing up all of your ingredients without remembering to add the salt. And you might now remember to add the salt when it's already late. Like I said, baking is a science. There are rules to follow. If you have finished mixing your batter and it's time to portion them into the baking pans, and now you just remembered, oh, you didn't add your salt, or you didn't add your baking powder. At that point or at that time, it's already too late to do that. If you're not careful, you might have to start afresh. Why? Because this is something you are making for your customer. You don't want to give your customer something that they will not be happy with, right? So always make sure to put out all of the ingredients you will be using to bake before baking. Okay, number 4. It depends on how you want to say it. I'm putting it as number 4, but in reality, it's supposed to be number 1. Like if you want to start baking, that is the first thing you do. So make sure to turn on your oven before starting to put out your ingredients. Let your oven be the first thing you do anytime you have made up your mind to bake. If you have decided, I'm gonna be baking right now, just let the turning of your oven be the first thing to do before you start setting out your ingredients. The reason I'm saying this is if you do not turn on your oven first, your oven needs to be at certain temperature and needs to heat up before your batter goes into it, or before whatever you're baking goes into the oven, right? So you don't want to turn on your oven when your batter is ready, because it will cause you to sit your batter for too long to get the oven to heat up. Now you might end up ruining your batter. So what you want to do is, if you don't turn it on before starting to bake, you might completely forget. And if you forget it, it might cause you to ruin whatever you are baking. Because sometimes after mixing whatever you want to put in the oven, you don't want them to sit out for too long before getting into the oven. So your oven must heat up to a certain temperature before any baked goods can go into it. So number 5, you must know your oven. All ovens are not the same. So timing and temperature are extremely very important for the oven. So if a recipe calls for 350 degree Fahrenheit to be able to bake that cake, and if you do not have enough knowledge of your oven, and if your oven is, when you turn it on to 350, because the recipe calls for 350, and because you do not know your oven, that oven that you think is 350 degree Fahrenheit might probably be under 350 degree Fahrenheit. It might be 300. Why? Because all ovens are not the same. So if you have enough knowledge of your oven, you would know if 350 degree Fahrenheit is truly what it is on your oven. And the reason for all that is because you have enough knowledge of your oven. Another way to do that is to use the oven thermometer. That would help you know when your oven reaches a certain temperature, or whatever temperature that the recipe calls for. So number 6, you must have a checklist. I know this sounds so weird, but it's the fact. You must have a checklist. Look, if you are just starting out, some of us that have been baking for quite a while, we are used to certain things that we do that it's really difficult to make silly mistakes. But these mistakes they happen sometimes. So but I'm telling you, the right thing to do is to have a checklist. If you have a checklist, it will help you, because sometimes your frame of mind when you are baking might not be the same at all time. You might have a lot of stuff going on with your mind. You might have a lot of stuff you are doing at the same time that can cause you to omit something, to omit an ingredient, to omit whatever you are using to bake your goods, to bake whatever ingredients you are using. You might omit one of it. So, but if you have a checklist, as you set out your stuff, as you set out your ingredients, you want to check it. Number 1, I have my flour. Check. Number 2, I have my baking powder. Check. Number 3, I have, and the right way to do this is, if you know, for instance, you're going to be baking a cake, you already know the ingredients, or you know what the ingredients the recipe calls for, so you list them out. So as you list them out, while setting them out before baking, you want to start checking. Number 1, flour. Okay. Number 2, baking powder. Number 3, butter. Checking. Number 4, buttermilk. Whole milk. What? I don't have my whole milk. I don't have my milk on the table. Because you were able to check. That's why you are able to find out the milk is not on the table, or the butter is not on the table, or the salt is not on the table, or the baking powder is not on the table. Because you're able to check. So the checklist is very important. And that brings me to the end of the tips and tricks I for you all for baking from scratch. And I hope you use these tips because it will go a long way to bring